The Pac-12, better than we thought? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, rating and ranking the conferences. This is my favorite project each and every off-season. We take the results of every non-conference game among the Power 5 conferences. Throw out the group of 5, throw out the FCS. This is a closed experiment, just analyzing the results, putting them into context of the 5 major conferences, the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12, and putting it into perspective. So we start with, obviously, the record of that particular conference against the other 4 leagues, but then we put it into context. Check out our introductory video where I explain the formula, even though you'll get a gist for what the formula is here, as I am just a kind soul, and I will explain it as we go. All right, we're going to start our series with the Pac-12. And again, certainly quality wins against the group of 5 should count. Bad losses against the group of 5. Performances to a certain extent against the FCS, if you lose those games as a Power 5 league, should count. But this is a closed experiment. So for the first run through the series, we're just looking at the metrics against, for the Pac-12, the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. We will then put the other games into context. All right, let's just look at the metrics. All right, the Pac-12 non-conference went 27-16, won just about 63% of its games. Overall, that's against the FCS and the group of 5 as well. That doesn't seem too impressive to me. We will have to see how the other 4 conferences did. But 63% outside of the conference isn't real good. Not real strong there. Okay, this is how it breaks down. Against the Power 5, the Pac-12 went 9-10. That doesn't look very impressive, but it doesn't look awful. But let's put the games into context. Who beat who? Against the group of 5, that's not a good showing. The Pac-12 only went 9-6 against the group of 5. Let's look at some of those games. A couple decent wins for the Pac-12 against the group of 5, in Stanford defeating San Diego State, and Utah with a win against Northern Illinois. But a lot of bad losses, and maybe not necessarily bad losses, but anytime a Power 5 loses to a group of 5, that probably shouldn't happen most of the time. So the group of 5 really beat up on the Pac-12 here. Houston beat Arizona easily. Cincinnati beat UCLA pretty easily. Fresno State over UCLA, 38-14 in that game. So Fresno State putting a hurting on the Pac-12 with that game, and also a win in the Las Vegas Bowl against Arizona State. San Diego State beat Arizona State as well. So Arizona State lost to 2 group of 5 teams. Again, San Diego State and Fresno State. And also we had Nevada defeating Oregon State. Not an upset, but it's a Power 5 losing to a group of 5. So 9-6 against a group of 5 is not good. 9 games against the FCS, and the Pac-12 took care of business. Basically held serve. They should win all those games. So 27-16, we'll see how that fares compared to the other leagues, but it doesn't look impressive to me at this point, winning 63% of its games outside the league and 47% against the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. All right, let's put the wins into context, though. Let's look at those wins. Okay, so in addition to the Power 5 conferences, we include Notre Dame, BYU, and Army. Washington beat BYU. Washington State beat Iowa State. Stanford beat Pitt. Oregon over Michigan State. Cal won 2 games over other Power 5 leagues, over North Carolina and BYU. Utah beat BYU. Arizona State beat Michigan State. And Colorado beat Nebraska. Those are the games. All right. Generally, better teams beat worse teams. High seeds beat low seeds. You're going to see this across the board. That's almost 90-some% of the games. The higher seed beat the lower seed. It only makes sense. That's how they became a higher seed, by beating the lower seeds. Let's see if there's any outliers here. Probably the best win for the Pac-12 outside the conference. Did they win any really big games? No, they did not beat any monumental teams. They didn't beat some of the better teams in the other conferences. The best team that they most likely beat, the Pac-12, was the Washington State win in the Alamo Bowl over Iowa State. an Iowa State team that went 6-3 in the Big 12. That's probably the best win. Other decent wins for the Pac-12 would be the 2 wins over Michigan State. But again, Michigan State only finished 7-5, regular season 7-6, with a bowl loss to Oregon. Michigan State obviously also lost to Arizona State. And then Stanford over Pitt. Those are probably the best teams that the Pac-12 beat. They didn't beat any really good, prominent teams. Obviously, the likes of Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma don't really lose to anyone. Out of all those teams, none of those teams lost to anybody outside of the league until the playoffs. All right, so let's put these into context. Washington was the 1 seed. They beat BYU, the 8 seed. So if you checked out the introductory video, you know that every game starts out being worth 14 points. The reason for that? Because there are 14 teams in the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten. Therefore, we had to seed the leagues based on a 14-slotted league. Therefore, we adjusted the seeds for the Big Ten, or for the Big 12 with 10 teams, and the Pac-12 with 12 teams. Therefore, Washington, the 1 seed in the Pac-12, becomes a 1.16 seed. That's how it translates to a 14-team league. So Washington, the 1 seed, beat BYU, the 8 seed. So take the 7 seed difference. Since Washington should beat BYU, we take those 7 points away from the 14-point win. You give 7 points to the Pac-12. They did win the game. Give them 7 points, but it's so your average win should be 14 points. If a like-seeded team is beating a like-seeded team, a 5 seed is beating a 5 seed from another league, then it's a 14-point win. That's the baseline, 14 points for a win if a like-seeded team beats a team of the same seed in another league. So, for example, Washington State beats Iowa State. Washington State was the 2 seed in the Pac-12. Iowa State was the 3 seed in the Big 12. So that would be a 2 over a 3, takes off 1 point off that 14-point win, becomes a 13-point win. The adjusted seeds, actually Washington State was technically a 2.33 seed, and Iowa State was a 4.2 seed. So we made all the calculations here. Stanford, a 4 seed, beats Pitt, a 3 seed. So that's a higher seed win for the Pac-12. And so they get 15 points. They get the 14 points plus the 1 seed difference, 15 points. Oregon, 5 seed. Michigan State, a 6 seed. So they take off the point here for the 14-point win. It becomes a 13-point-something win. So really, the best win from a seeding standpoint for the Pac-12, we talked about the Iowa State win, the 2 Michigan State wins, the Pitt win. In terms of quality of teams, those were the best wins. But in terms of a seed difference win, was Colorado as an 11 seed in the Pac-12, beat Nebraska, a 9 seed in the Big Ten. And Colorado actually comes out to a 12.8 seed because of the adjusted seed difference. So Colorado over Nebraska, from a seeding standpoint, is the best win for the Pac-12. There you go. That was the best win for the Pac-12. The rest of them are the type wins you would imagine. So all those wins for the Pac-12, 9 wins against the other leagues, they get 113 points. So the average win for the Pac-12 was 12.6 points. Again, the standard win is 14. That's the baseline. If a 1 seed beats a 1 seed, Clemson beating Alabama in the national championship game was a 14-point win for Clemson in the ACC, a negative 14 for Alabama and the SEC. But for example, again, Cal beating North Carolina. Cal's a 7 seed. North Carolina's a 13 seed. They should beat them. So take away 6 points, the 6 seed difference from the 14-point win, and it's an 8-point win for the Pac-12. So add all those together. The average win for the Pac-12 is 12.6 points. All right. In the 9 games that the Pac-12 won against the other conferences, those Pac-12 teams won 57% of its games in the conference. And we measure in conference because that's a closed experiment. They could be beating FCS teams out of conference and all these other teams, but we know the quality of those Pac-12 teams was 57%, a 570 winning percentage against the Pac-12. Well, they were beating teams outside the Pac-12 that only won 49% of its games inside their leagues. So they should win most of those games. Now, they won 9 straight in those scenarios. The average seed of the Pac-12 teams that won those 9 games was 5.9. About a 6 seed was beating an average of a 7.2 seed, which again, basically makes sense, but they're winning 9 out of 9 in that scenario. All right, the Pac-12 losses, let's look at those. These are very understandable losses, believe me. 2 losses to Ohio State by Washington and Oregon State. So the best team in the Pac-12 lost to Ohio State, of course, in the Rose Bowl. And the worst team, the 14 seed, the 12 seed but adjusted to a 14 seed in a 14 seed league, Oregon State loses to Ohio State. So that's a great example of an aberration. Ohio State's a 1 seed. Oregon State's a 14 seed. So that's a 13 seed difference. The 1 seed should beat the 14 seed. So the Pac-12 doesn't take much of a hit for that at all. The 13 seed difference takes off 13 points on that win. So you go from 14, take away 13. That's only a 1-point loss for the Pac-12 and a 1-point win for the Big Ten. Ohio State defeating Oregon State. It shouldn't count for much, and it didn't. So again, Washington lost the big game to Auburn in week 1, and that turned out to be a huge loss for the Pac-12. Consider this, Auburn went 3-5 in the SEC, so they finished as a 10 seed in the SEC, and they beat a 1 seed in the Pac-12. Again, the 1 seed in the Big Ten, Ohio State beats the 1 seed Washington in the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame over Stanford, we gave Notre Dame a 1 seed. That made total sense. They were undefeated. So the 1 seed Notre Dame beats a 4 seed in Stanford. TCU over Cal, that was in a bowl game, the Cheez-It Bowl. TCU was the 5 seed in the Big 12, but adjusted a 7 seed. So think about that. If you're a 7 seed in a 14-team league, then the 5 seed in a 10-team league should be the same as a 7 in a 14. So TCU converts to a 7 seed. They beat Cal, also a 7 seed in the Pac-12. Ohio State over Oregon State, Northwestern over Utah. Both 3 seeds, 3 seed in the Big Ten, 3 seed in the Pac-12. Northwestern comes back from 20-3 down to beat Utah, so big loss for the Pac-12 there. These 2 losses by USC didn't really hurt the Pac-12 because they were to such good teams. USC lost to Notre Dame, a 1 seed, Texas a 2 seed. And USC was only the 8 seed in the Pac-12. Arizona, the 9 seed, lost to BYU. We designated them an 8 seed. And then Oklahoma over UCLA, again, the number 1 seed in the Big 12, defeating UCLA a 10 seed or adjusted 11.6 seed in the Pac-12. So despite all those losses by the Pac-12, 10 losses against 9 wins against the other 4 leagues, these were really good teams they played. Consider this. They played Texas, Oklahoma, Notre Dame twice, Ohio State twice. So those are most of the 10 losses right there. Ohio State twice, Notre Dame twice, Texas and Oklahoma. 6 of the 10 losses were to the best teams in the country, some of the best teams in the country. So in those 10 losses by the Pac-12, their winning percentage in conference play was 51%, which is pretty high, actually, for teams that lost 10 consecutive games outside of the conference. 51.6 is the winning percentage of those Pac-12 teams. But they were playing tremendous teams, as I just mentioned. Ohio State went 9-1 in the Big Ten after their Big Ten championship game. Oklahoma went 9-1 in the Big 12. Texas went 7-3. Northwestern went 8-2 in the Big Ten after losing the Big Ten championship game. So a lot of high-quality teams that they lost to. So it's not surprising they lost 10 consecutive games to those kind of caliber teams. And the average seeding in those 10 losses for the Pac-12 was 7.3, and not surprising, just a 3.6 seed, a very high seed, average seed in those 10 losses for the Pac-12. So it all comes out to this. That's the win total, 113.3. Subtract the loss total, 102.7, and the Pac-12 finishes with a plus 10.6 points. That's just against the Power 5. Again, the Pac-12, I'm thinking, in comparison to the other leagues, did not perform well against the group of 5. 9-6. And with all those losses by Arizona State and other teams losing these group of 5 games, does not look impressive. 27-16, I believe, will be the worst record outside the conference for any of the conferences, considering what the Pac-12 did. That's our take on the Pac-12. That's just the raw metrics. They lost to a lot of good teams, high-caliber teams. Ohio State twice, Oklahoma, Notre Dame twice, Texas, but they lost those 10 games. They didn't beat anyone really good, but they also didn't necessarily win their games with their highest seeded teams winning those games. Like Oregon didn't play a non-conference game against the Power 5 in the regular season. So not a lot of significant wins, but they weren't games in which their best teams in the Pac-12 were crushing bad teams in other conferences. They were beating decent teams. 8 seed, 3 seed, 3 seed, 6 seed, couple 8 seeds, a 6 seed, a 9 seed. All right, that's our take on the Pac-12. Again, these metrics won't mean a whole lot until we release the rest of the videos and you get to compare what the Pac-12 did against the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, and the SEC right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Smash that like button. Give us a like. Give us a comment. Let us know where we miss it right here. No, we are not taking dominance into consideration, and that is a strong consideration, and I understand that. That could be a great factor to put into this, but it makes it just a little bit too complicated. Obviously, if, let's take the Stanford-Pitt game. Stanford beat Pitt. 4 seed from the Pac-12 beat a 3 seed from the ACC. Stanford won that game 14-13. Game was up for grabs. Stanford should probably be getting more credit if they would have beaten Pitt 42-10 instead of 14-13. So this is just based on wins and losses, just results. Obviously, we don't take injuries into consideration or players missing bowl games, anything like that. And we don't take into consideration, again, the group of 5 as well. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, where we deliver the best discussion, debate, and analysis in the land. Please, again, like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos. We will see you next time.